Welcome to Doulos Christos. I'm Paul Perkins.
I'm Daniel Sprague.
And we have a guest with us again today. His name is Joshua Perkins. He's my oldest son, and he's our resident historian for today.
He's back.
Glad to be here.
Oh, good. I'm glad he said something. So it's been a while. It's been a while because
he was on before.
Well, I'm not even talking about him. I'm talking about the podcast in general.
Yeah. We've been on a short hiatus.
My brother even texted me and said, "I need my inspiration." Yeah. So we're back, and you've been busy.
It's just my schedule's been really strange, just being on night shift and stuff. So.
That's what I said. I think the last time because I did that one when I was overseas, and and then I said you were out saving the world because you're in the medical field,
kind of like Batman.
Oh yes,
but
cooler,
not cool,
more awesome.
Yeah.
You know what they say? They say always be yourself unless you can be Batman.
That's what. Yep, exactly. Yeah, I would definitely be Batman over being a nurse if that was an option. To think about it, I'd be baptized. I'd be baptized. I'd be baptized. Batman baptized. Same thing. It is commanded, so
that is so true. Hey, today's topic is what's big in the news. Anybody know? Raise your hand. I see that hand back there. You are correct. It is
cryptocurrency.
No. Does anybody even talk about that anymore?
No, not anyone.
Did anybody someone got rich off of it?
A lot of people got really rich. And then a few of them went to jail.
And talking about people going to jail, our topic today is former President Donald Trump. Not that he's gone to jail, but the court just ruled. I think a judge threw out the evidence for something because of...
Yeah, one of the more recent charges that was brought against him was found to be acquired in an illegal manner. So, whatever that means, all of those files that had been brought forward were dismissed.
Well, the timing of it is just... It's incredible because it's right after the shooting, and it's kind of like people are going, "Oh, they just felt sorry for him. Now they're just going to not put him in jail. He got shot in the ear."
Yeah, I don't see that being a thing that the government would do. They wouldn't just be like, "Oh, poor baby."
Well, I guess not. Anyway, let's talk about Donald Trump. The assassination. I was interested.
Assassination attempt.
Yes, he actually wasn't killed. Was he?
He has risen from the ashes, like the phoenix.
And we're going to talk about that later on because of the beast in Revelation. But but let's talk about history a little bit because there have been presidents who have been shot and killed. So this is where, Joshua, you come in. So who are all the presidents?
So there's four of them. Abraham Lincoln is the most famous, who was killed. The second one is James Garfield, who is actually, I'm pretty sure he's from Ohio here and has a museum here in Ohio because I think I went to it. I tried to get you to go to it and you didn't go with me.
Well, your goal is to go to all the presidential.
It is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and my goal is not to.
But you didn't get Chick-fil-A afterwards. He was killed. True. Garfield was killed by a guy named Charles Guiteau, who thought that he deserved a political appointment, and that's what happened at the time. Presidents would get appointed, and people would get into politics, and then you would reward people's loyalty to you by appointing them to political office and or to administrative offices, and he thought that he should get appointed and thought that he was going to get appointed, I think something like the ambassador to England or something. And this guy was a nobody and couldn't get Garfield to listen to him or even talk to him. And so he went and shot him. Another one is William McKinley, another unknown president. He was killed in 1901.
And how long was he president?
How long was he president? I think not a couple of months, probably. Yeah. Same thing with Garfield, and both of them actually hung on for quite a while, but they died mainly because of infection.
Sure, in the hospital.
And so with Garfield especially, the accusation is that really the doctors are the ones who killed him in the end because they weren't caring for him properly. And then the last one, another famous one, John F. Kennedy, who was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. Do you know who else died on that date? You probably
don't know, yeah.
C.S. Lewis died on that date.
Wow.
His death was overshadowed because he died on the same day as Kennedy. So,
wow.
He was not assassinated. He just died on that day.
Died.
So those are the 4 presidents who've been assassinated.
Yeah, that's really interesting. They're all shot, right? I mean,
all shot.
All shot. And now there are not just presidents who have been assassinated. There have been the assassination attempts, and we've had 2, 3?
2 prior to Trump, where the president was actually shot or was harmed. The first one is Teddy Roosevelt was shot. In fact, he actually there's some interesting parallels between Teddy Roosevelt and Trump. Roosevelt was elected, lost the second election, and then was elected again on the third one. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with Trump, but Roosevelt was more of a populist than he was kind of a career politician, and in fact, kind of upended the political status quo by creating the Bull Moose Party. And in fact, when he got shot, he finished his speech.
Well, that and Trump would have.
Oh yeah,
he had his fist up and he was shouting "fight, fight, fight," and he would have finished it if the Secret Service would have let him.
No, that's right, he would have. Ronald Reagan was shot in '81, and but he lived.
Okay, so out of all of those assassinations and assassination attempts, how many were conservative and how many were more liberal?
Oh, good question. Let's see here. Lincoln was Republican. Well, I think that conservative and liberal would mean very different things across time. So sure. I think that would be hard to categorize it like that. Lincoln was Republican because he was the first Republican president. Garfield, that's a good question. What was Garfield? Garfield might have also been Republican because they were because the Republicans were essentially in power for a long time after the Civil War, and but quite corrupt. Like the presidential office was considered quite corrupt at that time, really starting with Grant and moving.
Well, this isn't going where I was hoping, when I was
yeah.
Republicans were all the ones shot, they're all corrupt.
Teddy Roosevelt would have been more progressive for his time.
But was he Republican, Democrat?
He would have been more Democrat, and the Democrats kind of ran him out, so he started the Bull Moose Party.
Oh, so he was independent that way.
JFK was a Democrat. Ronald Reagan was Republican. And I don't know what McKinley was. Let me just click on his...
and Trump is Republican.
Trump's Republican, though McKinley was Republican. Trump's Republican, but Trump's a populist. I wouldn't call Trump ideologically Republican.
Yeah.
Trump's a populist who has tapped into the feeling of people who also happen to be conservative. But even recently, in talking about abortion, he's changed his tune on abortion in the last 3 months
to become more progressive.
To become more progressive on that. And specifically saying that if Republicans hold to a more conservative view on abortion, they're going to lose elections. And so he's very practical.
Yeah.
So anyways, I think that on the question of ideology, I think it's complicated.
Well, yeah. So it's interesting that it is a broad spectrum of political ideology that have been assassinated, and the reasons why are probably less about politics than about craziness, because you've got people because this guy who shot, at President Trump, former President Trump was in the medical field, but he was a nursing home aide or something like that in the nursing home. So it wasn't like he was someone prominent. All the theories that are going around, the conspiracy theories that is that he probably was manipulated to go out and do something that he might not have normally done because he was on the edge or something like that. Of course, the one that I found interesting in conspiracy theory is that Trump hired him himself to shoot him so that he could get elected from sympathy votes.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
Yeah.
That's a bold move. If that were real.
Yeah. You're really
you got to have a lot of trust in a sharpshooter to take that shot.
Yeah, I don't think I would have hired someone who worked in a nursing home.
Yeah, that's not the guy. I probably would have consulted, I don't know, military.
Oh yeah. So interesting parallels. We start. We talk about end times, and so this is one of those conspiracy theories that you get from Christians going through. Is that in Revelation? It's really interesting. It says in Revelation chapter 13, 3 and 4, it says one of its heads. It's talking about this beast. One of its heads seems to have a mortal wound. But its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. So it's this idea of this mortal wound, and so people were kind of saying, well, look, he got shot in the head. He got shot in the ear. Mm-hmm. But that's why when Kennedy got shot, there was all these rumors that he actually lived and he is still on the island of something that...
I remember when I first came across that in high school. I'd never heard anything about that, and I came across an article, and it kind of it was really intriguing, because there was all of these things about how he was from one of the lost tribes of something or other, and so.
Yeah, so when anything like this happens, in the Christian world, you start getting conspiracies about the end times and what's going to happen when Jesus returns, and is Trump really the beast, and we've talked about that before, and how I've always said that what Trump lends to that discussion is more how easily people are led astray by someone who has a charismatic appeal.
Yeah. I think what Josh said is the most accurate description of Trump. He's practical.
Yeah.
He finds the best way to function or manipulate, and he manages that very well. Yeah. And I think he found that the most powerful majority of the country, powerful meaning the group who could pseudo-military support him, would be the conservatives. And so how do you gain ground with conservatives? Well, anti-abortion, all the stereotypical things that in the past he hasn't really supported, which is kind of weird with him, I think.
Would you have said that President Lincoln was kind of that way too? I mean, he had ideals. I'm not sure Trump has any core ideals, but he was very practical too. Lincoln was, because he looked at the landscape and said, "Okay, this is what I believe, but I think this would get us where I go." Where even when in becoming president, he wasn't the majority vote.
Well, and I mean, think about Lincoln, and the reason why he became president in the first place is because they couldn't agree on. He was nobody's first choice, but he was a lot of people's second choice. When you went to the because at that time you didn't vote for, there was no primary like we have it today. It was that they had delegates that went, and there was a lot of horse trading. I mean, today, like yesterday, Trump was nominated. Yesterday, that whole thing is just the administrative procedure, whereas it used to be like you got the 1,000 delegates in there, or the 500 or whatever, and you were really it was, you didn't know what was going to happen in the end. And so everybody thought that there was a couple of other candidates that were really vying for it, and that were really vying for the Republican nomination, and nobody could get elected. And it took 4 or 5 ballots before Lincoln started to gain some ground, because people realized that these other two guys were not gonna get there. So Lincoln was kind of this like, well, I guess so. Like if this is all we can agree on, and then he and a lot of that was because I think Lincoln was practical. He was nice to everybody. He was, it's a fine line in politics between practical and deceptive, or practical or flexible and manipulative. And kind of the real politic that you need in order to create coalitions to get things done versus holding to your principles. And so Lincoln, and then he won the election. Largely because not only this, but a big element of it is that the Democrats had because the Democrats were largely in the South, and were largely pro-slavery. They were the one, they were kind of like, well, they didn't want to participate because they kind of saw the writing on the wall, and so it's probably more than you wanted to know, but there you go.
It was interesting that after the assassination attempt of Trump, that President Biden called him up, and talked with him and was concerned about him and told him that that he and his wife were praying for him and everything. And so Trump was asked, well, so how did that phone call go? And he goes, well, it was very cordial. It was very, very kind of him to do that. So I thought that was classy. It was good politically too. I mean, that you don't look like you're just, I'm glad I got shot kind of thing. It was because even one of my daughter-in-laws, who's not a pro-Trump person, says, she goes, I don't like Trump at all, but man, we shouldn't be going around assassinating people, and that's so true, isn't it? I mean, it's and the hard thing is that you read really conservative blogs or something, and they're like just fight against this kind of thing, and then you got the liberal side who are going, the ultra liberal side is going, man, I wish they'd hit him, and this kind of stuff. And so you've got, how do Christians respond to this whole thing? How do we respond to people, because we know we don't want to assassinate people? So how do we talk to people about it in a non-political way, about
you mean
our
talk
faith?
To people about the assassination attempt?
The assassination attempt, yeah. How do we discuss it with them in a real way, so that we're not dismissing the importance of it, but yet focusing on something that is more of eternal value.
I think that when we're talking about the assassination attempt, what comes to mind is when Peter cut off that soldier's ear in the
Garden of Gethsemane.
And Jesus said, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword, and that was directly an enemy of Jesus at that time. And so I think that is a pretty direct address at how we should, as Christians, address our enemies politically and spiritually. Because I think a lot of people forget that our greatest desire is the redemption of souls. And I think that in America, we think that, being American equals being Christian. And so that also means that anyone who disagrees with your party disagrees with your faith. And so there's a lot of hate involved with it, which isn't supposed to be there for the faith.
Right.
That's how I feel about that.
Yeah, I think separating out our faith from our politics is a very difficult thing for some people.
And that's not new.
No, it's not.
I mean, you see the Israelites, when Jesus came in, they expected the Messiah to be a political savior.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't surprise me when people act like Trump's here, he's going to make America great. Just like they were like, he's going to make Jerusalem great. Yeah.
Well, Joshua, you live overseas, and you have a lot of friends who are either from Europe or from other parts of the world. How do they see these things? Coming from a different political perspectives, governments.
Which things specifically?
Well, politics in general, but assassination attempts, the violence. And now some countries, that's how they change governments, is they overthrow despots or something like that. Maybe they think that's a good way to do it, but here we are supposed to vote people out, not kill people. But how do they view our politics?
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, it's such a diverse. Think about like all the different people that we know, whether they're from Europe or from the Middle East, or from Africa or from Asia, and it's hard to summarize it. I would say that generally speaking, the Europeans are much further left on average than Americans are, and so whereas we see Democrats as left and Republicans as right, they see Democrats as right and Republicans as far right. And I've heard a number of European friends say that, but then when you get to the Middle East, they are always very confused by elements of our political system, because the political system, the rhetoric can be quite vitriolic, and they're very confused by that, because you only use that sort of vitriol when you're ready to physically harm somebody. And so the rhetoric is confusing, and it's interesting too, because when we're very used to disagreeing with people publicly, and or used to seeing people disagree publicly, and but the Middle East and the Gulf, the Arabian Peninsula, is where I have most of my experience, is tribal, and one element of that is that you protect the tribe. So inside you fight, but you don't ever let anybody outside see that. And so even if you don't like your ruler, you're not going to say that to an outsider. And so seeing in America where we value First Amendment rights, even if it means that people are speaking disrespectfully about the president, is very confusing to them. Why would you let somebody speak disrespectfully about the leader of your tribe? Right? I mean, that's a very general way of saying that. It's more complicated than that. But so they find that element very confusing. And whereas Americans, we are more concerned about being right than preserving the relationship. They're more concerned about preserving the relationship than being right. Sure. Again, those are generalizations, but I think that they...
Of course, our tribe is our tribes are broken down into Republicans and Democrats. So, we might not speak out against our candidate because we're going to support him. We're going to speak out against yours. So where, someone from the outside sees our tribe as the whole United States, we're broken down into smaller tribes. I remember when Trump was first running for president, and we were sitting with a family, and the father was wanting to know a little bit about American politics, and in the end, he just shook his head and said, you just need a king. You just need a king.
Dictators are great when they are benevolent.
That's right. That's right.
They are, but it's all well and good until the dictator is not benevolent, which is usually how it goes in the end.
Yeah.
So,
well, politics is always a touchy subject to broach with people, because just like our faith, people get really tense when you disagree with them, and they don't know how to sit down and talk about things reasonably sometimes, or just passionately. You can talk passionately about something and not be angry, though I think sometimes passion comes across as angry, for some people, and but it doesn't have to be. So as Christians, I think that we have to be very careful about how we speak out passionately about our politics. Because in the passage where Peter cut off the ear of the servant, Jesus says, my kingdom's not of this world, and so we need as Christians to realize that just like anybody else. And I think that my daughter-in-law said it just clearly. We shouldn't be going around assassinating people, even if we disagree with them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that's a general thought in the United States. I don't think anybody's really going, yeah, well, there's probably somebody out there going, yeah, I wish you would have hit him. But most people aren't doing that. Even if they hate Trump, they don't want to see someone shoot him, you know. And that's a good thing about our culture. And I think our culture too, that openness that confuses the rest of the world is really our strength.
It is a strength, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the more infighting that Congress and the president do, the less laws that come out, and that's always a good thing.
You know, I hear people say sometimes like, "Oh man, I just wish that the government would run more efficiently." It is set up not to run.
Yeah.
Like if they're fighting to, you know, it's set up that everybody's really got to agree on something for it to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you can't get a lot of people to agree on it, then it's not going to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
It's actually not a bad thing.
That's so true. But yeah, it's amazing how they can still
But
raise my taxes.
It's interesting too, just on the cross-cultural thing, that I think that there's an assumption in the United States about government that is unique. Personally, I think, and I'm biased because I'm American, but I think it's a good assumption, and that is that I remember when COVID started, and people started, and I'd hear my European friends talk, and you know, and I'm talking about the first couple of weeks when like nobody knows what's going on, and what is this, and people saying like, oh, well, the government will tell us what to do, like they know they will tell us what to do, and of course all the Americans are like, I don't want government to tell me what to do. That's not.
Yeah.
And the American conception of government is that, I mean, listeners can't see my hands, but there is a limited area that we have told government, you can operate in this area. That's the boundaries of the Constitution. Outside of that, government can't tell you what to do. Mm-hmm. We tell the government what to do, and we've said that they can operate inside this area. Very different conception. In the UAE, where I'm at, there's no conception of what the limitations to what the government can do. The government puts all the limitations on the people who live there, and you just assume that the government can do whatever it wants to, and then we are responsible to say, well, where are the boundaries? Like, what can we do and not do? Very, very different conception of how you go about interacting and your expectations for government.
Right.
So yeah, just a different
way of looking at government.
Yeah.
You know, what do we allow government to do, or what does government allow us to do? And I think there's a fine line even in the United States with that, because I think the more the federal government does take control of things, the less, or the more intrusion that they have on our lives. And sometimes it seems good, and sometimes, I mean, I'm on Medicare because I have to be, because I'm 65. The government forces me on Medicare. So, and no other insurance company will touch me.
There's probably a constitutional issue you can make about that somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Probably, but again, I don't have the resources to fight the government. And Medicare actually does provide
You
quite
just
a
got to
bit.
stand in your yard and yell out, unconstitutional! And
But
that should be good.
yet they do pay for all my drugs, so
I
it's
will
kind of
not
like
take your health care as I slowly waste away. But that's the American way.
That's right.
and the governments go back there going, okay, we're saving money.
That's right.
We'll spend it on something else.
Yeah.
So, hey, so our two listeners out there, thank you for joining us. My brother being one of them. Shout out to Brian Perkins down in Florida. And we hope to be a little bit more consistent here in upcoming months and weeks. But you've been very busy, and
It's been good. It's
Yeah.
been good.
It's been good.
There's a lot of other stuff to pay attention to, and as we look at this, I think that it's good to think about as we enter the political season who is your loyalty to. As you were saying, Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world." Don't get distracted by the kingdom of this world.
Yeah.
I think it's really easy during these seasons to think that you have to be loyal to a kingdom of this world. And
Yeah.
that's not where our loyalty should lie.
Yeah. So who should I vote for?
Jesus. No, I don't know. I'm indifferent.
So
I think that both sides could potentially hold things. I think that you should pray about it and follow your conviction.
Yeah.
Because I think there's bad things about both sides. There's good things about both sides.
Can I add something to this?
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
Am I allowed to?
It depends what it is. Is
Okay.
it?
You can edit it
Oh,
out.
okay. All right. All
If
right.
you think it's bad.
You get no opinion.
I think that
Parenthesis.
one of the, there's still so much we don't know about the kid who shot at Trump, and but I'm going to venture a guess, and there's some indication about this already, is that he was quite isolated, and one of the things that happens, that I think tends to happen, is that particularly when people get isolated, but I think this can happen in general, is that we get so into our technology feeds, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and so then that shapes our reality. And when you don't have good relationships with people outside of your feed, then that becomes your whole reality. I mean, I was talking with someone earlier this week that was like, I'm just so worried. I'm so worried, and it's stressing me out, like talking about current events. And this is before the assassination attempt, and they just let's be real time.
It is be real time. Sorry about that.
There we go.
Trying to get everybody in, but
No, you gotta take it from. I'll let you do what you want to do.
Oh,
Can you do the zoom out thing?
No, take it right there, and then it'll take you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I take a picture of you guys.
Yeah, you take a picture of us, and then it'll stop, and then it'll take a picture of you.
Oh shoot, I can't take a picture of you two together. I'll take a picture of him.
Yeah, take a picture of Dan.
Oh, are we actually being real?
We're
Oh,
being.
yeah.
Oh, I didn't know this was
being-
actually be real time.
This
Yeah,
is be real time.
Apparently, he's on Be Real
Up on
now.
the social medias.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, good. And
Speaking of social media.
can I read-
Speaking of social media.
Can I redo this?
I think so.
That doesn't seem very real.
Oh yeah, I can do it again. I don't have to. I have to wait before I send it because my nose was sticking up in the air. There we go. This is for my grandchildren because that's the only people I sent it to.
I'm on there too. I didn't even get a shout out on that.
Outrageous.
Okay,
But this
sorry.
is an example of what I'm talking about. You're more interested in who you're connecting with online than the people right in front of you. But we get into our echo chambers, right? And for some people, their Facebook feed, their Instagram feed, and CNN or Fox News or Newsmax or MSNBC or whatever it is that is your choice of drug, that becomes their reality. And I think it's so important to be connected with real people in a real place who have different opinions than you, and whether that's people at church or people at your workplace. But I think, but I will, I'd venture a guess that this kid was very isolated and was in his own world of what reality was, whatever that reality was.
Right,
He was apparently registered as a Republican, but then gave money to a Democrat PAC, and so who knows what his political views were, but that's a challenge, and and when we get so into our own little world, then the outsiders become these people we don't know, who are then and it's easy to make them the enemy.
Right.
But when the people I disagree with are the people that I work with, and actually 90% of my interaction with them has nothing to do with politics, it has to do with how am I getting my work done today? We're both upset with our boss because he gave us more work to do, or he said this or that, like that totally reframes the way that we see people. And so it's important that we have real relationships with real people, and not let our devices be the arbiters of our relationships in reality.
I'm sorry, I was looking at something. No, that is very good, and it really is about. I'm sorry, says the pastor over here, but
No, sorry, I didn't pay attention to what you were saying.
That's
I mean, that was happening before social media came along.
all I know is
10
that
years old.
Men's social.
No, I'm just kidding.
So yeah. So when I'm preaching and I see people on their phones, they're always telling me, "Oh, I was just looking at my Bible." Yeah, I know that. Okay, so no, but you're right, Joshua. That isolation point, I think it's important for the church to to help people to feel community and to feel that they belong, because even in the church, people can feel isolated and alone, even if they're in the midst of a lot of people. And so we need to look outward and to be engaging people in discussions and in conversations so that they can really feel like they belong, even when they are introverts and don't like to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because you do talk really well on our podcast, but you're a quiet guy.
I have a lot of opinions, but when there's a lot of stuff being said, it's more comfortable for me to not talk. Because I feel like it's like information overload if there's too many people around. I just kind of have to process.
It would be easy for you to become isolated?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's weird because, like, there's a part of me that tells me this lie that it's better for me to be isolated. But it's like, because after, like, for example, after like a 3-day stretch or something at the hospital, my body will be like, hey, just sleep. And, like, resting is good. But after a while, like, sitting there by yourself or playing video games for a while or whatever, it just gets dark, Like, even though it's good to recharge after a while, it's like, you're not supposed to be alone.
Yeah.
There's a reason that was said pretty early in the Bible.
And that's why God gave you Gwen.
Yep, he gave me Gwen and a bunch of friends to keep me accountable for that. And
she's so outward.
She's very extroverted. She is the opposite end of the spectrum from me.
She drags you to all those good things. You're like, I don't want to go, but then you have a good time there.
Yeah.
Most time. Oh, okay.
It's good to stretch, though.
Yeah, it is. It is. All right. Well, this has been a good discussion, though. Yeah. We, of course, one of our mottos in here is that we don't have all the answers, and all we can do
it's
is
not my motto.
Well, no, that is not your motto. That's so true. You have all the answers.
I got lots of opinions.
Well, that's why we brought you on, because you are the expert of your own opinion.
I like that. I'm the expert of my own opinion.
That's right. So. But, we always want to point people to Jesus, because in the midst of all of this, that's where we find hope, and that's where we find true perspective in life, and he answers the questions that are the deepest and most meaningful to us. But we have to be seeking. We can't, we can ask him to fix everything for us, but if we're not seeking for truth, then... and as I think that you guys were saying earlier, too, there's so much information that is out there for us, and to know what is true sometimes gets clouded in all that information. And it's interesting that the Apostle Paul says, I do not want you to be uninformed. And so he is constantly informing people of the truth. Jesus was constantly informing people of the truth so that they'd have something that would help us to distinguish that which is right and wrong. And what Paul says is that we are not to be conformed to this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds, so that we might be able to discern what the perfect will of God is. And so we can't do that until our mind's been transformed. That only comes through the power of the Spirit. So if anybody out there is seeking truth, we want to encourage you to seek it in the Scriptures. Start with the Gospel of John and keep reading, and then if you have more questions, you can contact us.
That we would. I would love to. Our Father in heaven, thank you, Lord, for this day. I thank you for the truth of your word. I pray, Lord, that you would encourage our hearts every day to be actively seeking in your word, and help us to just be convicted by the truth of that, Lord, and change to be more like you. Lord, I pray that you would be with everyone that was involved with the assassination attempt, that you would, there's a lot of people affected through that, Lord. I just pray that you would be with them, and that you would ultimately bring souls to you. And Lord, we just pray that with this whole political season and everything, that you would have your hand on it, that people would be praying that the wisdom that you grant them would be involved in these choices. We thank you, Lord, so much for the grace you show us in Jesus Christ, and we just pray that you would bless us as we go on today, keep us safe, and we just thank you for all the good things you give us.
And with that, we're out of here.